there's that, we've been hearing a lot from commentators that we're both West African countries. It was a bit hasty to bring out the big stick, as it were, but the big stick being the range of options culminating in the most serious, if we need to go there, being the use of force. Mm-hmm. Now, maybe I could understand that a bit, because we spent a lot of last week sort of explaining on this program. People knew it already, but we still had to mention it because people kept on going to President Tinubu did this and that, especially as it relates to the goings on in mediation in Niger. And we had to keep on saying that it's ECOWAS. President Bola Ahmed Tinubu is the chairman of ECOWAS, and he doesn't work alone. It's a committee, but that mindset seemed to be sort of prominent with a lot of commentators. Now, what would be your look, Dr. Abayomi, at ECOWAS indeed saying that, not excluding, because even the last time ECOWAS has spoken, it said all the options that were initially presented are still good. None has been taken off the table. That was like their response.
Mm-hmm. Well, first, it's important to appreciate that Niger Republic is a signatory to ECOWAS protocol, which establishes democracy as a principal government, supportable and sustainable in the region. So, Niger Republic, like other members of ECOWAS, are bound to respect the principles of democracy. I think sometimes we misunderstand the issue, really. We keep talking about Niger Republic and Nigeria and so on and so on, but the principal issue is the right of the people to constitute government over themselves. That's the principle that democracy establishes. And that is the principle that ECOWAS protocol establishes as sustainable. The right of the people to constitute government. In other words, where a dictator, so to say, simply takes over government, it defeats that protocol. Now, it's also essential to understand that even in monolithic governments, as against pluralistic democracies, the right of the people to constitute government over themselves is still respected. For example, you take China or Russia or any of the monolithic governments, they still have to surrender to the will of the people to constitute government. Now, a dictator defeats all of that.
Indeed.
Because it is a self-imposed government over equal citizens in defeat of the rights of the people. Now, it is precisely because of that that international law recognizes what is called just war and unjust war. Okay. And it is important also to appreciate that there's a difference between a war for the purposes of establishing democracy and a war for the purposes of enforcing democracy. A war for the purposes of establishing democracy, for example, if you go into a nation and you want to establish democracy as against the existing political order, that will be considered an unjust war. Professor, I think, Michael Walzer, a political theorist, has discussed it and is adopted generally in the world. If, on the other hand, you go to a nation for the purposes of enforcing democracy, it is considered just war because it is protective of the rights of the people to constitute government over them and to sustain their fundamental rights. So the discussion should be tailored along rationality and acceptable norms of international law and political rights of citizens. It is not a question of, we are going to war, to wage war. No, that is not the issue. The issue is, if you are committed to a certain treaties, you are bound by it. It's just like we send our troops to UN peacekeeping. Now, the reason we have to do that, we are bound to do that, is basically because we are committed to the UN, we are members of UN, assembly. So it should be understood from that. It's not a personal agenda of President Tinubu.
It just so yes. happens that, as is well known, he's a long-standing Democrat in the sense that he's always professed democracy way before he came into Abuja, as it were.
Yes.
And so he took the opportunity, as you know, upon assuming the chair of ECOWAS, to voice that out again. Of course, nothing had happened at the time.
Yes.
So when you now, those that are looking at it and don't have the benefit of the explanation you've just given, tended to sort of, as it were, put a lot of it on his doorstep, so to speak, especially as Nigerians in the North especially, not exclusively, but in the North especially, we're saying that, perhaps that was a bit hasty. We have our own problems, and have you solved our own problems before you start going elsewhere, and all that kind of thing. But I suppose, as you've just said, Dr. Abayomi, ECOWAS is a body, even though critics have said that when there were other coups, did they go this far? But now it is Niger, and you are going as far as this, which some people, they've brought up well, I don't know. One has to be very careful not to call it extraneous in a dismissive way. But because there's this relationship between a lot of our citizens and that of Niger, especially in the 7 states up north, they've taken it personally.
Well, it must be appreciated that most other West African countries are even more concerned with Niger Republic, Coup there, than other areas. Understandably, because of the closeness of Niger Republic to Nigeria. And the anxiety is that if peradventure, God forbid, that the madness should come to Nigeria, then the entire West Africa is in trouble. If we read in this morning, the Chief of Army Staff said that there were people that was trying to instigate military takeover,
Indeed.
Dictatorship in this country.
Indeed.
Now, in Nigeria, let's look at the history. We began the process of dictatorship in 1966, Agoye Ironsi. Then it went to Gowon, 1966 to, I think Gowon then was there to 75. Then he was overthrown by Murtala Mohammed, 75 to 76. Obasanjo came in, 76 to 79. We have an interregnum, Shagari. They usurped government again, Buhari, 83 to 85. Then Babangida came in, 85 to 93. Then after Babangida, Abacha, 93 to 98. Then Abdul Salami. In other words, we spent over 30 years in the struggle. And what is a military dictatorship other than a ruffian? He doesn't respect laws. He doesn't respect citizens. It's not controlled. It's an unlimited government.
Not controlled by law.
It's not controlled by law. And the more fundamental tragedy is that all these changes are killings by military itself, killing itself. If we look at Burkina Faso, last year alone we have 2 coups in Burkina Faso. So the concern to Niger Republic is actually to stop the madness. Because if we don't stop the madness, where does it end?
Yeah. So the concern of ECOWAS.
Yes, the concern of ECOWAS is to stop the madness. And let us understand, it's fundamental to understand that it is not the concern about government, about the right of the people to constitute government over themselves. And the tragedy of absence, destruction of liberty of the people. I joined the struggle for democracy personally when I saw an army officer whipping a woman in Agege market, Agege bus stop market, with horse whip. Whipping a woman recklessly.
There were all sorts of things.
And there was no control.
None.
No limit. They don't have any limit. They behave anyhow, whether with regard to the resources of the people, the liberty of the people, and so on and so forth. And it will bring total disorder. Now, we are already in problems, facing the challenges of leadership, development, and so on and political in our country. Now, if this country, if we leave it, and this madness becomes an epidemic, prevention is better than cure. So the entire West Africa is more concerned, not necessarily, it's more concerned about Nigeria than even about themselves, because they know the implication. So when people are talking about placing the something on, the pressure is on him, on the president, by the entire West Africa, that look, we cannot continue this. How long are we going to continue? One captain will just wake up and take a gun. You know, if we wait for another few years, another captain will wake up and take a gun. And so on. How long are we going to do that?
Indeed.